Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about smoke units, more specifically fan-driven smoke units made by Lionel, and also the smoke fluid I like to use in them. To start with, I'm going to be explaining what all these electronics on the side do, as well as same electronics on this one. This one's actually brand new, never been used. It's the wrong one. I have this circled on this because there's no element in it. But if you look at the bottom of any smoke unit, any two units, the bottoms are always going to be the same. It's where they position the electronics on them. Like this one's a little bit longer, this one's a little bit wider. Now these two smoke units are from TMCC engines, but the legacy smoke units are basically the same thing. So starting with the electronics on the side here, this one's a little bit easier to see. But there's a couple of capacitors. This little thing right here is a voltage regulator. And then there's a diode back in there. So, this capacitor, you can actually see it on this unit better, but it's tied across ground and this thing that over here it says third rail. Not wanting to focus on that, is it? But it's a 1 microfarad 50 volt capacitor, which doesn't mean that much. Just the size of it, and I think they're actually kind of using it to reduce the current that can get into here, because if you put a capacitor across an AC current, it will actually want to short it out. Of course, if you have a bigger capacitor, it's going to make a bigger difference. But anyway, this pin on the side is the one that controls the fan, and this pin over here is the one that controls the element, and the one in the middle is just ground. The pin over to this side goes into this diode, which is rectifying AC into DC. And then from there it goes into this voltage regulator, which is a 5 volt one. It's a 100 milliamp 5 volt voltage regulator. And then tied across the outputs of this voltage regulator is a larger capacitor for filtering. And then you have the plug, which then goes out to the little fan, which runs on 5 volts. Now this fan, the terminals that are supposed to be soldered onto are broken off on it, but you can see how it works on this one. Same thing. And basically the element is, I think in this one it's a 27 ohm, and in this one it's like an 8 ohm, or it was until I took it out. May or may not have seen the inside of one of these, but I got the screws taken out. Set that aside. You have a little gasket. And then you have this little fan blade here. Now this one doesn't have any batting in it, but really all it is just like fiberglass wicking material in there. It covers about a 1/4 of an inch in there. Doesn't fill all the way to the top for sure. This is the circuit board. Now this, as I said, this is a TMCC one, so it has this sleeve on it still, which has a burnt spot for some reason, even though this unit's never been used. And that sleeve is only on TMCC units. They don't put them on the legacy engines. And if you have this on your TMCC unit, I would recommend cutting that off. But basically you have an air inlet hole right here. And then you have your smoke outlet hole over here. And that's where the fan is. And that's where your smoke unit funnel will go. Now this one's the same. Just that the electronics are over here. And these things just come apart with 4 screws. The gasket goes over it like that. See, there's a little hole for the fan. If you look into it this way, there's also a little hole for the fan to blow its air into this chamber, which is the heating chamber, and then blow the smoke out. Next thing that comes into mind when you're talking about smoke units, of course, is the fluid. On the far left, you have Lionel. They don't actually sell this anymore, but 6-62909. And I'm almost sure that that's the exact same as their premium smoke fluid. In the middle, we have smoke fluid. I think it's made by Bachmann. And on the right, we have this stuff, which is basically the stuff that comes with the radiator to run sets. But that actually came with the legacy engines, my heritage units. That's what that came with. And I still have a few more brand new bottles like this. What do I usually use? For fan-driven smoke units like I've been showing you, I like to use this stuff. This is really thin. This and this are both really thick. Now, I'm not sure why Lionel uses 2 different smoke fluids, but this stuff's a lot thicker than this stuff. And then this is about the same as this. Now, I've experimented, and with fan-driven smoke units, this works the best. It lasts the longest, and it produces the best white cloud of smoke out of all 3 of these. This stuff, I actually I've had it for years and years and years. And I used it in like a little battery-operated toy train when I was a little kid. But this stuff works really good. And this engine back here, which is a conventional engine as well. And it's a Rio Grande, came in a set. But it is the exact same engine as the Polar Express. And it works, this stuff works great in that. And then this stuff, I mean, it's basically the fluid from your ready-to-run kits or sets. And the only thing I really use that for anymore is just this. That don't get run very much. It's the Wisconsin Central. That was actually my first O-gauge train set. But anyway, I recommend this. If anybody knows that if they've bought a bottle of the Lionel Premium Smoke Fluid, I'd like to know if it's thicker or if it's thinner. One more thing about the fluid. I've heard about JT Megasteam, and it does seem like a pretty good product. I don't have any, but I think it would work good. Next thing I'd like to talk about is filling your smoke units. On the newer legacy engines, Lionel will give you a eyedropper like this, and they give you a little funnel like this. Now, I don't really use that funnel much for my engine, but the eyedroppers, maybe you can see that, they split open right there. And they also split open along these tips. This is what I call the Franken Dropper, because we put a better eyedropper on this, and then the tip of this one. But this one cracks down here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's also kind of leaking right there too. Now, Lionel customer service recommends using like a needle applicator bottle like this. But it's kind of hard to tell how much you're putting in. So in that case, if you got these, if you got the same needles on them, they're not sharp. But I like to use these because you can measure how much fluid you put in it. And usually with these, it only takes like that much fluid. If that, it's pretty much like this. But anyhow, that's how I like to fill them. Of course, the way that these come, you can probably tell, but there's a little dropper thing on there. And those, it's not something that I would recommend. It's not something that Lionel customer service recommends. Because what ends up happening is, I don't really have a smoke fluid funnel to show you, but we'll make do with what we got. That stuff will stick to the funnel, and then right here there's usually a little brass fitting where the funnel goes into. It'll get on that, and it also gets underneath this circuit board here. And what ends up happening is you don't actually get all that much on your batting inside of there. And also, it'll drip down and it'll end up causing what they call a meniscus over the hole here. And really all it is it's just a little film of smoke fluid. It's easy enough to fix, you just blow down the stack, but another thing that I should talk about with smoke units is how to tell when they're getting low. And the way that I've done it for years now is when the smoke starts to turn a bluish color and it'll start getting real thin. That's usually when I would say that they're just about empty. Okay, so final thought on smoke units is they add an awesome feature to these engines. And if you take care of them, it will last a long time. Probably for the life of the locomotive, with very minimal problems. And on the newer engines, you have the diagnostics, which can sometimes be a little bit of a pain because they're going to shut stuff off when they don't really need to be shut off. And that's about all I have to say about smoke units.